no, the party is here. Okay, thank you. So, can you hear me? Yes. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me in RFC. It was very nice to be here again. We had a wonderful evening last night. So I will talk about tuning STT in double wire junction. So I will first explain the concept of the system and then show you the experiment done in plane junction, first DC, then pulse measurement, and then finish with recent result on perpendicular junctions. So, as you all know, spin transfer torque is composed, in fact, of two torques. One is damping right torque, also called in-plane torque or Schwanzewski torque, and corresponds to the deposited moment. Since you have electron carrying moment, the difference between outgoing and ingoing moment is left to the magnetization. So this is the first torque, and this torque is more or less linear with voltage, so it really depends on the voltage bias. And the second torque is Philae torque, also called out-of-plane torque, and it's due to the fact that electrons are reflected from both interfaces, and so it's a coupling. In fact, it's a magnetic coupling mediated by electrons. And this torque is mainly quadratic with voltage. So the spin transfer torque is, of course, used to write MRAMs. So as well planar or perpendicular MRAMs. And the idea is that then you need to write and read at different voltages, because otherwise you will erase your data while reading. So to be safe, you must read at current which is much smaller, or at a voltage which is much smaller. And that means that you read at low voltage and then the reading is slow, and that's a pity. And on the other hand, you need a sufficient current to write, and then it will lead to high power consumption. So one idea to suppress these two inconveniences would be to be able to tune spin transfer torque so that it's high when you want it to be high and slow when you want to read. So one way to achieve that could be the following. So you have a double junction with two polarizing layers. One is the usual reference layer, but then you add on top another polarizing layer, which I call control. And then you can have two different configurations. Either your two polarizers are anti-parallel, and this is what I call write mode, because in this case, electron flowing from reference to free layer will bring some torque, and electron quitting the free layer to enter the control will do the same as electron coming from the control and going into the free layer if the control had an opposite polarization. So in this case, the two torque add up, and then spin transfer torque is enhanced. Whereas in this grid mode, when the polarizers are parallel, the two torque subtract, and then STT is expected to be reduced. But if you have a closer look, in fact, in write mode, the two damping light torque add, and the two field light torque subtract because they are not bias dependent, and the field light torque don't depend on the voltage bias sign, so they subtract here, And so you have maximized your in-plane torque, your damping light torque, but and minimized the field light torque. But in read mode, this is the other way around. Now the usual damping light torque is minimized, but at the same time you have maximized the field light torque. So in fact, this double junction is really a model system so that you can tune the two torques, either enhancing one or the other. So first of all, I will show you what we get with DC measurement. So the different samples we studied are all these types, but at the moment we mostly studied these three first ones, and the behavior is more or less qualitatively the same, so I will not each time show you symmetric and asymmetric barrier. What I call symmetric barrier here is when they are nominally identical in resistance, but I'm not sure, of course, that they are really the same, and I have no specific ideas about the interface quality on each. And what I call asymmetric is that when I really have a second barrier which has a resistance much different from the other one. So how to realize it? So we are going to try the following stack with a synthetic antiferromagnet at the bottom, then the barrier, the free layer, another barrier, and another synthetic antiferromagnet at the top. And we have these two synthetic antiferromagnets are pinned, but on different materials with different blocking temperature. So one is on platinum manganese, and the other is on iron manganese. And so, thanks to the difference between the two blocking temperatures, it's possible to switch from write mode to read mode by annealing under magnetic field. So with this type of structure, you expect 4 different states. So in the write mode, when the free layer points to the left or to the right, you have a stage which is parallel on the bottom barrier and anti-parallel on the top barrier, whereas here it's anti-parallel here and parallel here, so I code it PAP or APP. So in this write mode, you will have in both states an intermediate resistance, and you don't expect much TMR. By contrast, in the read mode, you have either the full parallel state or the full anti-parallel state, so you have maximum, minimum or maximum resistance and full TMR. This is in fact the case, and so on the left you have the results on symmetric barrier samples, and on the right on asymmetric barrier sample. So in read mode you have maximum TMR for both, so about 100%, and in write mode, when the two barriers are really similar, there is only a residual TMR which is very small, whereas when the barriers are very different, then you get some strong TMR. What about now spin torque switching? So you are in write mode, and here you have nicely two transitions from one state to the other, and the voltage bias on each barrier is more or less half the critical voltage needed for a single junction. So as you want it, you have multiplied the spin torque efficiency by a factor of 2. So in this case, you expect less stress on each barrier, so nicer writing with less damage, because each barrier has only half the usual voltage. Sometimes, not in all junctions, but sometimes you observe back switching, which is due to the competition between usual STT and field light torque, which means that the cancellation here of field light torque is not complete. In read mode, in some very nice cases, you can, for all the current range, stay really well in the either AP state or P state. without any switching. But unfortunately, for some samples, and here I represent a few of them, you have unwanted switching, and this undesired switching may be due to thermal effects. So to check that, we plotted all these unwanted transition in this graph. We have here the bias applied and here the field, and you see that all these transitions appear close to the coercive field. So they are independent of the bias sign, so they are really probably due to Joule heating and thermal activation. And there is still a region where you can read the data without any switching, so it's possible to read without disturbance. Anyway, sorry. If this is really thermal activated switching, then it could exist, it should exist also in right mode, because here you don't suspect any spin transfer effect to produce this transition. So to check that, we must check that in right mode they exist also. And in fact, it's the case. Here you have close to the coercive field, on most coercive field, some transition that occurs for both positive and negative bias, and then it's only one bias that is able to produce the transition. So starting here, it's STT switching, and here also, but very close to the coercive field, it's thermal switching. To go one step further, we want to suppress all this thermal activation, and so do no more measurement with DC, but with voltage pulses. So in this case, we apply 100 nanosecond voltage pulse, and we measure the junction state after each pulse. In this case, you see nicely here that there is a spin torque transition towards the other state, and the same here. And so in this case, you have absolutely no thermal effect, and you see a nice STT switching. But unfortunately, this is not the usual case. I would say some junctions behave like this, so as theory predicts, but many of them behave like that. And it's less nice, because here, in fact, this is the mode switch, so which means that here the control layer is switching much before the free layer switching. So in fact here we see that we have, and we don't understand at the moment, so the reason we get this, we have a weak damping light torque on the free layer, and most of the effect seems to be on the control layer, and we suspect that it's a mixing of STT switching and temperature thermal activation, but this is not clear at the moment. So to check a bit, because this is quite a problem, I wanted to see if in single junction we have an identical problem, and in fact, in most single junction, in fact, there is a thermal switching, because it occurs for all voltage sign. And this thermal switching is much more clear than the STT switching itself. The STT switching appears only when you compare the slope here and the slope here. You see that this is a bit steeper, which means that there is some STT switching here. But anyway, in in-plane junction, pure STT switching is very difficult to achieve, and there are a lot of thermal activation. Anyway, in our case, in double junction, we only use this part of, so the equivalent thermal pole used in double junction corresponds to this part here in the middle. So what happens in read mode? And then in read mode, it's much more funny, I would say. You see that there is no thermal effect on the whole voltage range used because there is no transition towards the full parallel state, and this line is really corresponds to the coercive field. But by contrast, you have a clear transition here and there, so it's not dependent on the sign of the bias, and a clear transition towards the full parallel state. And this is really due to the field torque, and I think it's the first demonstration of a pure field torque switching. So because it's the only torque that remains in this mode, and it's pretty clear. So to be convinced by this interpretation, we did a bit of microspin simulation. So I show you only the ideal case where we say that torque on the bottom and top area are exactly the same, and that they follow the really simple dependence with voltage. Then in real mode, you have absolutely no damping torque and a maximal field torque, and we obtain this figure, so very close to what we observed experimentally. So this is really a field torque transition. In right mode, you have only damping light torque, and you expect switching at this either positive or negative voltage, and this was sometimes observed in our junction experimentally, but not all the time. So, to conclude this part on in-plane junction, we see that in right mode we are able to emphasize the damping light torque and multiply its efficiency by a factor of 2. The switching is no more efficient with pulses, but it's also true in single junction, and the switching we observe in DC is clearly thermally assisted. In real mode, the two damping light torque subtract but field light torque add. When we measure with pulse, we see clearly that there is no transition towards the parallel state, but there is a clear transition towards full anti-parallel state, and it's a pure field light torque switching. So now I want to move a bit to perpendicular junction, because perpendicular junctions are expected to be easy to switch because the energy barrier to switch is smaller. This was well explained this morning. And we also expect that there is little effect of field light torque in this perpendicular junction. So the junctions are now composed again of reference, pre-layer, and control, but each part is much more complicated. So reference and control are based on cobalt platinum multilayer or cobalt palladium multilayer. The reference is a pinned synthetic antiferromagnet on iridium manganese, and the control is not pinned. And finally, the free layer is a bilayer of cobalt iron boron. So, in the VSM experiment shows that all the states are well defined, and especially by doing minor loops, it's possible to identify read and write modes here. Unfortunately, after patterning the junction, only 3 states remain and not 4. You have here these 3 well-defined states. And so it's possible by doing a minor loop to obtain the read mode, but at the moment the write mode is not available. So on read mode, on symmetric and asymmetric barrier we obtain this, which was not expected, because here we see clear spin-torque transition depending on the voltage bias, as well for asymmetric or symmetric barrier. So, which means that there is a strong residual damping light torque in this system. that we need to understand. And the second remark is that there is no specific effect of phyllite torque in this case, which was expected from theory, which means that the AP full antiparallel state is not special, is not really favored in this system. Maybe only there, that's maybe something, but it's very small. But the main question is why we get damping light torque here where we expect it to have not. And one response could be the following. The hypothesis is that we have in fact non-collinear magnetization in the reference and control layer. It was recently shown in our lab by André Timofey that there is some evidence of big quadratic anisotropy in perpendicular magnetized junction. And if I show here the energy profile when you have pure perpendicular anisotropy and then you add smoothly a small in-plane term, at some point the minimum energy will no more be at the perpendicular direction, but at some angle here, and you will move from an easy axis to an easy cone. So if you are more interested in that, you can look at this poster, number 5. And this not perfect perpendicular anisotropy could be responsible for the fact that the magnetization are not purely collinear and that we get some damping light torque in read mode in this system. Anyway, we hope that this read mode reduces the damping light torque. And when we compare double junction and single junction, here you see in single junction very nice transition due to spin transfer torque, which again is consistent with what was expected theoretically, that spin transfer torque is much more efficient in perpendicular junctions. And here in double junction, in fact, here I show that here is the same voltage. So we see that in the voltage range, in the comparable voltage range, then we have no switching. So again, read mode could protect from writing. This conclusion is only a partial conclusion anyway, because these two samples, the double junction one and single junction one, don't have the same barrier quality, so it's not completely sure at the moment that this conclusion will hold with exactly identical barrier. So to conclude, I would say that in this double junction system, it's possible to tune STT by switching from read to write modes. In write mode, we emphasize the damping light torque, and the writing efficiency is multiplied by a factor of 2, so the voltage on the barrier is smaller, so it induces less stress on the barrier. And in read mode, then we have only, normally we should only have phyllite torque, and in in-plane junction, it induces a pure phyllite torque switching towards the anti-parallel state. Whereas in perpendicular junction, it seems that there is still a residual damping light torque due to non-collinear magnetization. So finally, I would like to acknowledge the work of my co-authors, so the non-permanent people and permanent staff, and especially Paolo Coelho, who is doing his PhD on this subject. And I wanted also to especially acknowledge the work of Baraduc, who did this amazingly very complex perpendicular anisotropy stack. And Bernard passed away in May this year, so I think it was the right place here to acknowledge his work in this community. Thank you for your attention.